Shiur is dedicated to Nishmas Rachaleya Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi. Okay, we started discussing introduction to the halachas of Muktza. We'll be covering Muktza over the next couple of shiurim. And just to briefly recap, so we pointed out that there are a lot of different categories of Muktza, but broadly speaking, we can really break down the categories of Muktza into two very, very broad categories. The first of those two broad categories is what we'll call the Isra of Muktza Machmas Gufa. And when it comes to Muktza Machmas Gufa, you have a category of Muktza where you do not have a vessel, you do not have a shem'lachto. It is an object that has no real function whatsoever on Shabbos. It's not used for anything at all, has no function even during the week. This is the classic case of Muktza Machmas Gufo, and obviously you're not allowed to move these items on Shabbos. For example, eitzim va'avonim, if you have branches, you have stones, objects that really do not have any inherent functionality whatsoever on Shabbos, that's going to be your category 1, Muktza Machmas Gufo. And that we pointed out was a very, very early takana. The Gemara Masechah Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph, says that's already during the time of Nevi'im Harishonim. David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, already the Gemara there discusses there was an Isser of Muktza Machmas Gufo. Then, much later in Jewish history, during the time of the Nevi'im Achronim, Ezra and Nehemiah, so there you found there was a laxity of keeping Shabbos. People were lax during the time of Nehemiah keeping Shabbos, and therefore, to tighten things up a bit, to go ahead and encourage people to keep Shabbos more carefully, a number of different takanos were made regarding the Isser of Tiltul Muktza, carrying certain objects, moving certain objects on Shabbos, and this is what we're going to call the category of Tiltul Kalim. What distinguishes Muktza Machmas Gufo from Tiltul Kalim is when it comes to the Yisra of Tiltul Kalim, again, historically a much later takana, and here we're talking about objects that are indeed vessels, that are Kalim, and therefore have a certain inherent functionality, and for whatever reason, Nehemiah said they shouldn't be handled on Shabbos, and then as Klal Yisrael during that time was getting better and better, more careful about keeping Shabbos, so slowly but surely the takanas were relaxed until we get to the point that we have today, is the category of Tiltul Kalim, of certain objects that were not allowed to move on Shabbos for certain purposes. Again, the most common category of Muktza in this class of Tiltul Kalim is what we describe as Kli shem'lachto le'isser. A Kli whose primary function is a prohibited function on Shabbos, that you're not allowed to move. So we have this, broadly speaking, two separate and distinct takanos. Isurim, Gzeros D'Rabbanan of Muktza. We discussed in the last year the reasons for those Gzeros. We'll not review that now. But when it comes to those two broad takanas, broad to a lot of nafkamina lahalacha. The first nafkamina, which we'll just mention, is when it comes to Muktza Machmas Gufo, an object that has inherently no use whatsoever, so that is Muktza across the board. It's inherently Muktza, and you're not allowed to move it for any purpose whatsoever. There is no heter of what we refer to as Litzorech Gufo uLitzorech Makomo. When it comes to the Yisr of Kli shem'lachto le'isser, you have an object, Tiltul Kalim. You have an object whose primary use is a prohibited use. So here you have a heter of Litzorech Gufo Litzorech Makomo. Meaning, for example, I have a pen. So pen has a primary use which is for writing, but it might have some subsidiary uses. Let's say to point, to scratch one's head if he doesn't want to touch his hair, or far reaches of his back. Are you allowed to use that object, that pen, for those purposes, not for writing, but Litzorech Gufa? So here the Gemara tells us that Litzorech Gufa is mutter. A Kli shem'lachto le'isser can be moved Litzorech Gufa. Your classic example is a hammer. A hammer's prime function is for banging in nails. You're allowed to use a hammer, says the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Shin Ches, Halacha Gimel, to go ahead and crack open nuts on Shabbos, to crack open walnuts, because that's called Litzorech Gufa. You're using the object for itself, but for its non-prohibited use. You'll find that heter when it comes to Tiltul Kalim. You'll not find that heter when it comes to Muktza Machmas Gufo. You want to use a rock to bang open nuts, that will certainly be prohibited. The second kula is Litzorech Makomo. When you have an Isser of Tiltul Kalim, Kli shem'lachto le'isser, let's say you have that hammer that's sitting on your chair, and you would like to sit on the chair. You need the space of the chair to remove the hammer so you can sit on the chair. That's going to be mutter. That's called Litzorech Makomo. However, when it comes to a rock that's on your chair, you have eitzim on your chair, so that's going to be prohibited. That was one nafkamina that we saw. Another nafkamina that we ended off in the last year was the halacha of basis. There is a halacha that you're not allowed to, if something is a base to a davar muksa, for example, your classic case is your candlesticks. they're placed on a tray, it's placed on the table, everything is supporting those candles that are sitting in the candlesticks. Everything is called a basis, a base for the inherent muktza that's on top. So the halacha is, even when that inherent muktza leaves, disappears, extinguishes itself, the halacha is that you still are not allowed to move the basis, the base. That's the din of basis, a lot of detailed halachas. If, for example, I have money in a wallet. Let's say comes along a child and pulls the money out of the wallet on Shabbos. Now I have just an empty wallet. So the wallet is still considered to be muksab as a basis, as a base, l'davar ha'asr, even though the the money has already left, the money continues to be muksa. If you look through the Shas has a number of different examples of basis l'davar aser. Among those examples, you have a case of even al piachavis. You have a rock